but when you get up close, there's something wrong, and it's not just with the arguments. This is an interloper trying to suck some blood out of these YouTubers manufacturing the controversy, crafting mountains from molehills. Pointing out that James is probably not this super whimsical marshmallow man 24/7 is not this master own, it's not a conspiracy theory. He's sitting over here like, what inner darkness does that duplicitous smile hide? He's probably just a dude.
This clip was said by the video essayist Quinn Curio, and it was used at the end of my video on Daft Pina over 1 year ago, after he made his video on the Odd Ones Out titled Hidden Hypocrisy. It was meant to show how Daft had exhibited similar behavior to that which Quinn had called him out for in the past, as in this video he had crossed a line he used to stay behind. My goal was to just take a quick jab at Daft and call it a day, but I didn't realize this would be a repeated criticism to give in the coming months. Thing is, Hidden Hypocrisy is the beginning of a series of actions where Daft would ignore Quinn's previous comments, and led me to question his moral character and intentions. This was quite shocking and disappointing, as I really liked the videos he had put out before 2021. Back then, I felt like I was learning about the process and struggles behind artists I had admired in the past, as well as discover new artists to enjoy in the future. While he still makes videos like this, his lack of hesitation to return to his old habits is shocking. However, what I found even more shocking about this was Quinn's silence and assistance in Daft Pina's actions. Now, when looking deeper, you'll find it is not just Quinn, but several connections that Daft Pina has made which help to serve as validation for his poor treatment of others and his manipulative tactics. However, I would argue Quinn Curio is the most important, so she'll be the main focus of this video. Hello everybody, I'm the Bandit of the East, and today, we'll be talking about Quinn Curio and the problem with Daft Pina's community. Let's begin. Before there was Quinn Curio, before there was Daft Pina, there was nothing. And before there was nothing, there were Storytime animators. Here's your relatable joke.
My dog died. Yeah, they do that.
Okay, while it's fun to imagine Storytime animators as Lovecraftian entities beyond our comprehension, they're not nearly that complicated or threatening, as far as I know. For those of you that are unfamiliar, at its conception, Storytime animation was a new format of content that used quick simplistic drawings to allow awkward introverts such as myself to express themselves. One of the most popular ones was the Odd Ones Out, aka James, who utilized clever transitions and still images to both save time and still tell interesting stories. It was his success which popularized the simple format, as it felt anyone could take a part in this promising trend, and to be honest, they could. This resulted in a bunch of Storytime animators flooding YouTube, mostly consisting of teenagers using simplistic images and making the same types of jokes. This got a lot of attention from viewers, but also a lot of hate, creating an equal and opposite reaction in the form of critics. Despite calling themselves critics, they were far more focused on nitpicking any problem they could find, being as rude as possible about it, and then saying the Storytime animation community cannot take their fair and justified criticism.
What was that? That wasn't criticism, you
Among these critics, there were three which stood above the rest in attention, even appearing in Senor Palo's parody animation of Storytime animators. These were the up-and-coming Turkey Tom, the already respected The Right Opinion, and lastly, the once slow-speaking Daft Pina. Despite being the highest regarded individuals of this commentary group, their videos in the subject weren't any better than the rest of the members of the community. Even The Right Opinion, whose videos were very well respected by the commentary community and other content creators, had his video on the Storytime animation community viewed as his weakest, as he took things out of context, glossed over important details, and said very ignorant things, specifically the introverts aren't loudspeakers point. Turkey Tom acted as a troll who used his harsh vocabulary to start problems and then acted like a victim when people retaliated. The biggest examples of this were when he on one occasion called the community group of pussies, on another occasion made a big deal about Speechy blocking him, completely leaving out the fact that he was harassing her and calling her fat. However, Daft Pina was arguably the worst. In his past videos, he told Storytime animator Chili Panda to quit drawing when she was starting off, which is not how anyone improves. But most infamously, he said Gene Animations, one of the most popular storytime animators, faked her mental disorder in her face reveal video to get views, trying to make her out to be a manipulative liar. He also made a video reviewing Rule 34 art of her, something which she has repeatedly said makes her uncomfortable. When you consider that these were the largest members of the animation commentary community, it's easy to see why the storytime animation community weren't fond of these critics. It's because really, they were not critics. They were bullies, or at the very least, very ignorant of what they talked about. At the end of the day, they also mostly consisted of teenagers who wanted attention and all said the same types of things. Ironically, they were just as interchangeable with each other as the storytime animators they criticized. Fortunately for the storytime animation community, a new player in the game was about to come on stage. On October 30th, 2018, about 2 months after the Right Opinions video, a new YouTuber, Quinn Curio, dropped a video that not only jump-started her YouTube presence, but halted and collapsed the storytime animation critic community. This video was titled, "Everything Wrong with the Animation Community Critics." This video was absolutely amazing. In it, Quinn Curio looked at each decent-sized critic and their claims individually, and took them apart with the precision of a surgeon and the class of a queen. She pointed out every flaw in logic, every case of hypocrisy, and every instance that these critics had removed context to make things appear worse than they were. It went to the point that at times, it wasn't even Quinn arguing with the critics, but the critics arguing with their own words. This video was a karma the storytime animators wanted, and the critics deserved. After this video, almost every critic stopped bringing up storytime animators, changing the content that they made, and greatly improving on the way they approached making their new content. Some channels even quit YouTube altogether. One of the largest developments from this video, however, was the transformation of Daft Pina, who went on a redemption arc speedrun. You see, after this video, Daft Pina made up with Tim Tom after making a harsh video on him, got on good terms with many of the storytime animation community members, apologized to Chili Panda on both YouTube and Twitter, and started having Quinn proofread his essays. All these actions displayed some much needed growth and maturity in both his content and character, and prompted Quinn Curio to make a comment on her video and a tweet on Twitter encouraging people to give Daft Pina a second chance, which in my opinion was completely deserved based on his improvements. This marked a series of videos that are both well done and researched, where I became a fan of his content. I found his video on Eddsworld to be endearing and educational. He's the reason I know about Telepurte, who continues to inspire me to improve my art, and he's the reason I learned about Epithet Erased, a series funded by its creator Jello Apocalypse, who gave insight on what it means to produce your own series. He even stepped into the storytime animation community, talking about James's books, Torte, Chipflake, and getting in contact with Pansel's Pajamas. Honestly, everything seemed settled, and I was more than happy to give him my support at the time. That was until he dropped a video at the end of 2020, which was the first video I ever felt the need to make a response to. In the last half of December 2020, Daft Pina started making posts on his community page about his next video, about how it would be focusing on James as a person, and now he had to make sure it was perfect. I'm going to be honest, I was hyped. Knowing Daft's careful research and the quality of his videos, I was prepared to learn something new about a creator I'd seen on YouTube for years. These high expectations set myself up for a plummet into the pit of disappointment, as I watched cracks in Daft Pina's attitude start to form. This video was bad. It was poorly researched, hypocritical, misleading, and manipulative, which was shocking, as it was the complete opposite of what I learned to expect from Daft. It honestly felt like I went back in time to watch the old Daft make a video on someone, and I wasn't alone in this opinion. Multiple people, including myself, felt the need to make response videos shortly after Hidden Hypocrisy's release. Not only that, but comments on Quinn Curio's video started appearing about how Daft really hasn't changed based on his video on James. While I felt there was something to be said, I also felt that perhaps this was just a one-off thing, and Daft would apologize for it like he did in the past, as there were a lot of things which he had gotten wrong. Instead, he never apologized, but took things even further. He showed pictures of his cat though. Now, Shameless Reskin was overall good, at least until he brought up the past video he made on James. This would have been the perfect opportunity to apologize for what he had gotten wrong in the previous video, but instead he highlighted specific parts of James's reply to Hidden Hypocrisy just to make him out to be a bad person and a bad friend to Adam. This completely ignored the aspects he got wrong, such as when he focused on James not mentioning his girlfriend's name in one of his videos.
Come to think of it, in like a recent video, James talks about his current girlfriend. I bring this up as if they broke up. Would he delete the video? Is that why she isn't named? So he can just keep the video up if they broke up?
His invitation to the streamies, which Daft said James paid for to prove he was the best animator.
On another side to James, he participated in the Streamy Awards of 2019 after sending a form that cost him money. Now James himself can prove he's the one and only de facto greatest animator of them all.
And the whole aspect of unfriending an animator from his MAP project, something which Daft still hasn't shown hard proof for, despite having a dozen people to contact on this.
Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
What's worse is that at the end you see Quinn Curio edited the script for this video. But why is this an issue? Well, first off, this is a sequel to Hidden Hypocrisy, which was referenced in Shameless Reskin. As I mentioned before, Hidden Hypocrisy was not a good video. It is very reflective of Daft's past videos that Quinn called him out for in the first place. The fact that Quinn helped him out in such a script was concerning. To be honest, I feel like Daft only got her help as an attempt to validate his arguments, which wouldn't be the first time, but more on that later. For now, let's go over Quinn's criticisms and how they compare to Daft's actions. Let's start with the scene from Quinn's video, when it comes to the concept of context and its importance.
And after receiving criticism from Daft, Tabs blocked him on Twitter, not for harassment, but on the sole basis that he was being critical in his video. And she tried to justify that people should ignore his criticism in her nice track, saying that his videos are
them and their subjective commentary.
Hey, out of curiosity, do you guys want to see 6 more seconds of context to Tab's rap? I didn't even question it at first. I assumed she was casting Daft as a mindless hater. But as I edited this video, I realized Turkey Tom, The Right Opinion, and who knows how many others all cut the clip in the exact same way, and I got suspicious.
And I know it, believe me, being compared to those of a par. You're not alone on this, understand? The pressure's just bizarre. Whose approval is necessary? Daft, the Virgin Mary? So-called experts, them and their subjective commentary.
Yeah, now it's a line about how the critics are causing them anxiety, and that's because they are aware of them. Tabs is saying you don't need their approval to do what you want to do.
In this scene, Quinn mentions that the video which a lot of these critics used against the Storytime animation community was clipped and taken out of context. There was more to the clip that they were using, but giving more information would ruin the false point they were trying to make, thus it was clipped. Now let's take a look at how this compares to Shameful Reskin. Around midway through this video, Daft mentions Dangle's now deleted Tumblr post on James. Here, Daft focuses on several aspects, one of them being how James only draws white characters.
And the former friend showed the apology, citing it as non-sincere, specifically stating his age, and that he only draws white characters, because to him, they're more relatable.
First of all, this is incorrect at the time Dangle wrote this post, as there are multiple videos where James draws and voices dark-skinned characters. Also, there was a part Daft failed to mention in Dangle's post, where Dangle said she downloaded extensions on her computer to hide anything related to James. This means that Dangle really had no way of knowing what James was drawing or doing, so making claims about who and what he was drawing was not something she had the right to do. This also gives reason to believe that Dangle may not be the most reliable source of information, but again, this is not mentioned. This is some pretty important context when Dangle is your main source of information concerning James's personality behind the scenes. When you refuse to show aspects of your own sources, which could make your claims shaky, you're removing needed context from the viewers. Next, Daft talks about how the situation between James and Dangle was not handled due to Dangle not accepting James's apology.
Being severely vague about his racism towards the former friend, and he specifically tried to twist the story by claiming it's a private matter that was handled, which if you've seen the public post that she encouraged people to show when the apology not being accepted wasn't handled.
First off, that's kind of bullshit. People are not required to accept your apologies, as the purpose is to acknowledge that you were wrong, not so people will forgive you. This is especially rich since Daft got uppity when James didn't forgive him for what he did to Jaden. In that regard, doesn't that mean that his situation with James isn't handled either? But I'll get to that apology later, as that's another situation everybody misses, and boy, is it important. You know what else is important? A portion of Quinn Curio's video specifically focused on Daft Pina, saying the following.
Apology pro tip. Try to apologize for everything you did wrong instead of pretending everyone was mad at you for just one simple mistake. Correct misinformation that you spread, whether purposefully or accidentally. If you don't think you were 100% wrong, maybe explain specifically what you do and do not apologize for and why you feel that way.
So, James apologized to Dangle and offered to talk things out with her. Perhaps he was a little vague, but he still made an effort to apologize, which matches up with Quinn's advice. Actually, after looking into the information more, it shows that James and Dangle got back into contact with each other and potentially discussed things further. It also says she regrets making the post because of how Daft handled it. I wonder why that hasn't been mentioned. So, James followed Quinn's advice, which was meant for Daft, but James still hasn't settled the issue. Meanwhile, Daft has completely ignored the same advice when dealing with James and Dangle, but he doesn't need to say anything. This alone shows the hypocrisy with Quinn when it comes to Daft, but this is only the beginning. Next, Daft focuses on James's comment asking him to delete hidden hypocrisy, making it look like James is trying to hide the evidence of his past actions.
And although he left a public comment on my video, he also tried convincing me to delete it. This is keeping in mind, shortly after my video released, he deleted his entire Tumblr page that he started a long time ago, thus causing the links that once worked on the former friend's posts not work anymore. So if not for this video and the last one, would you have known these things happened?
Hey, whatever happened with the former friend after you made the video?
Oh, she threatened to sue me after a lot of people were attacking her for being racist.
Oh my.
Hey, out of curiosity, want to see one more sentence of context after this statement? There, it mentions that Daft ignored Dangle's wish to not have her story in a sponsored video, something which she stated in both her Tumblr post and directly to Daft Pina. Now, because of the bad response he was getting for going against her wishes, Daft finally chose to delete the portion of his video that had Dangle's post in it, which basically did the thing that James asked. However, Daft still fails to acknowledge the fact that the comment he was citing was focused on a portion that is now removed, which from the perspective of someone who watches Hidden Hypocrisy now, seems like James is just trying to remove negative comments about him. Oh, and I want to point out that Daft's claimed reason for putting Dangle's post in his video was so other victims of James could speak up. So his method of helping victims involves going against their wishes. That's a radical strategy. But what's more interesting is that Daft tries to frame things in a way so that using Dangle's post was a good thing, stating that if he never made his video, nobody would have even known about the situation between Dangle and James.
So if not for this video and the last one, would you have known these things happened?
Thing is, as we already mentioned, the victim disagrees, specifically stating that she regrets making her post at all because it was just used as a tool for profit, and has taken a great toll on her mental health. She feels like Daft considered his opinions more important than the truth or her safety, which based on how he reacts to the situation, and how he makes light of Dangle getting called a racist and deleting her posts, honestly seems true. Whether or not you believe Dangle to be a victim is your choice. However, if there are actually any more victims, I sincerely doubt they would speak up based on what happened to Dangle and how it worked out for her. At the very least, they will not go to Daft. His involvement literally made things worse, but he does what he can to ignore it. You know, Quinn, your pro-etology tip would be very useful right now, wouldn't it? Or maybe some more of that much-needed context. I made a video discussing these issues in a little more detail. It'll be linked below.
As lying to your audience about what you're promoting or making is cheating them.
So, lying to your audience is bad, but lying to the supposed victims is A-okay? I'll have to keep that in mind. Now, I do feel the need to talk about James's game for a moment. As one of Daft's videos states, his books, mobile games, and board games show patterns of just looking like cash grabs. Can't Catch Harry was just a worse version of Spoons, and his mobile game, well, that is just a cash grab. The aspect of the pay-to-win part of his mobile game being out of his control leads me to believe that he either didn't read the fine print or didn't care. I want to make a repeated mistakes joke, but the fact that it happened with his first book, his first board game, and his first mobile game makes it look a lot more like a choice than a mistake. As for Cafe Chaos, my main gripe is the lack of honesty from James. He advertised it as his game, which I'm assuming means he owns the right to it, and said that he worked really hard on it. This gave the appearance that he designed the game, which, while he never technically said, is likely the impression he was going for. As a person who is respected by upcoming child artists and writers, he likely serves as an inspiration for creativity and expression, and to them, his game would appear to be an extension of that. A lot of people would buy this just to support that same creativity and expression which inspired them. And learning it's not that, but just a reskin of someone else's work, makes that whole aspect disingenuous. Yes, I understand that the title Food Fight Odd Ones Out Edition likely would not have sold well, but a little more transparency still would have been nice.
And that brings in the idea that the characters shown throughout the game are essentially pimping out your friends for merch.
As for pimping out his friends, that's complete BS. For one, they all likely agreed to being in the game, and would not have done so if they didn't want to. Also, this is giving smaller content creators, I said smaller, not small, more exposure to James's much larger fan base, possibly getting them a larger audience. Perhaps asking any one of the animators could have given more information on that, but that would risk getting evidence that goes against the claims staff wants to make.
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
But when it comes to these projects in the most part, I was originally going to say that maybe he was trying to make more money for a project. But based on the history with his board games, we can see that if he really needed money for a project, his fans would not hesitate to give it to him. That's all I've got to say about this. Now back to the main subject. Let's look at hidden hypocrisy again.
I, James, don't have to apologize unless it damages my business.
Well, that's ironic. First, the girlfriend bit. I originally had something else written about this, but I think I'll let Verdus Joe take the mic here.
Safety tip number 2 is that the more that you have out there, the more easier it is to match a dox, or fake one. For example, Jellybean has already shown her and her sister's name publicly. One on a public Twitter post and the other on the live stream and a VOD. Man, she is not the best at this whole anonymity thing. Try your best to limit all the stuff out there, because once it's out there, drama channels will not stop reporting on it.
Here, Verdus talks about the importance of keeping your identity as private as possible, emphasizing how it's more difficult to hide your identity when people know your name. This is in one of Daft's videos. Daft, the same person who said that James likely left out his girlfriend's name in his video about her so he wouldn't have to delete it. In my previous video on Daft, I said that he wasn't stupid enough to believe that. In this video, I now know I'm right, because he doesn't believe it. Otherwise, he likely wouldn't have Verdus saying this in his own video. He knew he was wrong the moment he wrote that statement, or at the very least, he no longer agrees with it. However, he won't say that. If I am going to be generous, this is either a complete lack of self-awareness, or the most indirect way someone could say that they were wrong. There's also the whole thing with the streamies, where Daft assumed James paid to get in to ensure he is voted the de facto best animator, which James debunks with stating that he was invited. So let's look at this. We got two things which, to be honest, have either been disproven or things Daft didn't even agree with. It's one thing to just assume the worst possible scenario, but it's another when you imply the worst possible scenario when you know you were wrong to begin with. In this scenario, I like to bring up these two moments from Quinn's video.
I think we can prove that if asked if they think they are overall a good person, they will probably answer yes. And your boys have been digging as hard as they can, but this is all they've come up with, and so I feel pretty confident in saying they are probably just okay people. People capable of being mean and salty and sarcastic sometimes, but overall not the cathedrals of ego you make them out to be. The right opinion thinks the odd ones out is kind of fake. Why are they doing this? My theory is they do this because of a very simple mistake. They picked a bad target. But you know, you get a couple thousand words into a script and you don't want all that effort to go to waste, and you know, these are big channels, so let's gussy this up by raising the stakes ourselves.
That must be what Quinn thought while editing the script for Shameful Reskin. Listen, I can understand how some of James's past actions can give a negative impression, but if we're going to be honest, it is not as bad as Daft makes it out to be, nor is it as bad as Daft's past actions in general, and is not different from what Quinn called out in the clip I had just shown. But let's take a look at the evidence of James's misdeeds anyways. So first we got the conversation with Dangle, where her and James argue about the Song of the South. Definitely shows ignorance. 7 years ago? Taking one conversation that happened 7 years ago between two people that knew each other a lot longer than that should not be a representation of their relationship as a whole. Seriously, they're acting like James is frozen in time based off of an interaction that happened a long time ago. A concept you think Quinn would have more respect for, considering that in the comment section of her video about critics, she says, "These people are not frozen in time." But the overall point here is that in the whole video, there was really only one valid criticism, which was the mobile game I mentioned earlier. 2 if you count James not giving Dangle any credit for helping him draw. And the fact that the other points, which were misleading or wrong, are either highlighted or glossed over in the second video, that Quinn edited the script for, when she was the one who stated the importance of acknowledging when you were wrong, leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. Now let's talk about the private DMs that Daft leaked between him and James. You know, the ones that stated that James didn't want to forgive Daft for his videos on Jaden and Rebecca.
And then I finished off the conversation with a quote from his own video.
So I think that the people you see throughout your daily life aren't strangers. They're potential friends.
But can you take a guess how he responded to that? Take a moment, because the whiplash of a response still hurts my neck to this day. He responded with,
"Because of what you said, I will never work with you or watch your videos, as the videos I've watched have been extremely disrespectful and biased AF, and when you inevitably leak this DM, let me explain to your audience why I feel this way."
Daft highlights this as a point to prove James's hypocrisy, since he didn't approach Daft as a potential friend. Now, if we ignore the fact that Daft introduced himself as a bully who just said mean things to people, that still doesn't change the fact that James was not required to accept Daft's apology. But what I find interesting is that Quinn spoke about a very similar situation with James and Turkey Tom, when James refused to follow him on Twitter and Tom threw a tantrum.
2. He was considering following Tom, but now he can see that Tom is no one that he should be associating with. That damn disgusting tweet is enough evidence to show that he is in fact a cretin.
Just because being followed by him is a thing Tom would want if asked doesn't mean he has to follow him. If he wants to unfollow people who insult his friends or people who he thinks are too trolly, that's his prerogative. Not all of us have to live by the ancient proverb, follows are not endorsements. This has to be the weirdest thing to moralize to someone about.
They got unfollowed because they put out a mean tweet towards an animator and then received the follow when they deleted it. It's pretty shady leverage being operated, but above all, it's just rather immature. And immature is something that seems to pop up a lot.
I think immaturity in this situation is being mad when people unfollow you, particularly people you don't know that well. Immaturity is not accepting that when you make content for adults, in particular pretty inflammatory content, yeah, a child-friendly channel might back away slowly. And you might notice that his argument, of course, ignores personal shame, people not forgiving you, people saying they forgive you but not really forgiving you, people who saw it deciding they won't forgive you, people writing you off because there's so many other people to get to know and this is all they know about you, and careers outside of the internet that might fire you for something you tweeted 10 years ago and have already apologized for.
Did you catch that moment about people not forgiving you? Thing is, Daft reacted similar, if not worse, to Turkey Tom when James didn't accept the apology. Daft was all like, "I apologized, but I guess he forgot."
Starting with my Jaden video, which this conversation took place after I apologized to Jaden, but I guess he forgot.
This really shows a lot of Daft's maturity and growth when he acted worse than a 15-year-old did when they didn't get what they wanted. Yet Quinn says nothing. But just to drive the point home, let's show a few more clips.
But you can delete a video, you can't delete a video's influence. And if I even have to say this, you can't delete how it made that person feel or how it makes other people who just watched it feel. And you should always keep this in perspective. This is primarily about whether or not a YouTuber respects your criticism when you tell them their backgrounds are lazy.
It's like Quinn traveled to the future to make this video, as everything said then still holds up now for Daft. But the difference is Quinn not only ignores this action, but actually seems to encourage it when she okays Daft's script, which continues to bash James. Oh, and here's an interesting little tidbit from an interview between Daft and Simi and Jimmy, which I love to look back to.
I made this one video 2 years ago, actually, called Jaden Faked Her Face Reveal. I don't know if you saw it.
I did not
But let
see
me
it.
tell you, it was not a good video. Not a good video. But luckily, I apologized to her for that. I was like, I'm sorry for ever making that video. And you know what happened?
She told you to kill yourself.
No, she forgave me.
What?
She did. And I was like, wow. one of her friends.
I'm not
I won't say
enjoying
who it
this
is.
theme of famous people actually being human with human responses. This is just blowing my mind today.
Well, here's the one thing. One of her YouTube friends, despite her forgiving me, they still hate me for ever making that video. And I won't say who it is, that'd be rude. But I'm like, okay, I guess apologies don't work, even though I fully regret ever making that video. And I won't say who it is, that'd be rude. And I won't say who it is, that'd be rude.
That one didn't age quite so well.
So once again, Daft knows what he's doing is wrong, but he wants his audience to believe it is right. And Quinn, on the subject of apologies, why does it seem like James should apologize for what he did, but Daft shouldn't? Now, I try not to grab low-hanging fruit, and TinaFate would honestly fall under that category since a lot of people have mentioned this case. However, there's one aspect of this situation that I don't see any people really mentioning all that much, and I think it needs to be acknowledged as it pertains to a pattern in Daft's behavior. Now, before I go into this, I'll give a quick rundown of everything. Basically, a male artist by the name of TinaFate, aka CEO of MILFs, like that name, was saying that they were a girl on the internet. On its own, that is not an issue, and sometimes people do it as a means to get more support. However, this becomes an issue when you talk to a girl who's a lesbian, thinks you're a girl as well, and sends you nudes. Oh, and that girl's a minor. This is a situation that TinaFate found themselves in, by their own fault. Now, initially this happened months prior to Daft's intervention. Once Daft caught wind of the situation, and heard that TinaFate was actually a guy, he did some investigating himself, and found TinaFate's Facebook page, which revealed their identity as a man named David. Daft then honestly threatened David that he had his face and would post it on Twitter if David did not come clean about his identity. I want to say the logic here was likely that if TinaFate did it to one minor, it was possible they could do it again. When David/Tina would not budge, Daft posted a blurred out image of David's Facebook profile, showing who he really is. The problem here, though, is that even though information was blurred out in the post, there was enough information visible for others to find more of David's information, which they did.
Those are some pretty significant breadcrumbs you're just handing everyone.
There's a misconception that Daft did this over Rule 63 Sora MILF art, which based on my research, I really haven't found a whole lot of concrete evidence for, and seems to be more of a rumor to make Daft look bad. Now, after receiving a lot of backlash from, well, everybody, Daft posted an apology on Twitter. The thing is, this was not an apology to David for releasing private information on them. It was an apology to his fans and his friends.
He continues on with a non-apology.
This served more as an apology for being a bad role model and causing problems for his friends. Although I don't really know how his friends were involved. Maybe they were getting messages from people who were angry at Daft? Either way, this was not a good way to end things, and it shows a complete lack of effort to apologize to the people he actually hurt. However, that has already been discussed by multiple people. What I think needs more recognition though is Daft's Discord conversation with Harley TBS when he first published the Facebook tweet. In the video where Harley covers this subject, he shows a conversation where he not only tells Daft that the post he made reveals sensitive information, but also proved it by sending a message showing that he was able to get more of David's information in just 20 minutes. Throughout this whole conversation, Daft replied fairly quickly. That was until Harley showed that what Daft did could dox someone.
The consequences of his actions, and if you remember earlier I said I spoke to him, well, on every other point I mentioned to him I received a reply within a few minutes. I sent him this proof only 30 minutes after his tweet release, showing him very clearly that his own tweet could literally dox someone, and it took him 3 Discord status changes and a whole day, and he still hasn't even replied. He's just ignored it. At first I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe he hasn't seen my message, but at this point I'd be very hard pressed to argue any defense for him not taking down this tweet.
Now, if you look at the times when the messages were listed, it may first seem like they were sent late at night, but you need to keep in mind that this is on Harley's Discord screen, and Harley lives in the UK, which has a time difference of 6 hours from Daft's time zone in Texas. Daft received messages within a reasonable time, roughly around 3 to 4 p.m. I find it very odd that he just stopped reading Harley's messages, as not noticing a reply that completely disproves your point seems off. I'm going to make a speculation here. Note that when I make a speculation, it's not based off of hard proof, but out of a theory from other information that points in a particular direction. Daft saw that his tweet could reveal sensitive information and ignored it. He knew, but did nothing, at least not until he got serious backlash, all because he didn't want to admit he was wrong. Now, I am aware that some of you will jump on me for this, but please, watch the rest of the video, as I have a reason, well, multiple for saying this. But back to Tina. When Daft made his apology, he never apologized to the people who he hurt, such as David and by extension his family, by putting them at risk. I know the aspect of Daft didn't apologize has already been stated, but the thing is, an apology is meant to not just acknowledge that you were wrong, but to tell the person that you hurt that you understand that you were wrong. No apology to David or his family was made. It was only for Daft's fans. You know, Quinn called someone out for doxing as well. Here's a clip.
By the way, Oh My Gosh It's James is quite upset that Speechy said that he doxed her. You could make an argument about hard and soft doxes, but like, he knows exactly what she's talking about. This isn't unprecedented.
I know where Speechy went to high school.
He figured out where she went to high school and told everyone. He actually posted a picture of her high school in the video and reminded all of us when she was a student there. Yeah, it's not quite as bad as posting a home address, but those are some pretty significant breadcrumbs you're just handing everyone in one convenient video. And it was definitely completely unnecessary for the point he was making. Out of context, this can sound super creepy, and it kind of is. But since I'm not showing you the full clip for obvious reasons, I just want to say it didn't come off as malicious, it just came off more like he wanted Sleuthy Boy YouTube detective points for figuring it out.
So Quinn clearly thought that just stating what school someone went to was a lot. What about one's private Facebook page? Now, it would be unfair to say that Quinn said nothing. She just said nothing publicly. Daft mentions that when he talked to his friends, he saw where he went wrong, and it was very possible Quinn was in this group of friends. This seems a lot more like Daft ignoring Quinn's advice and Quinn ignoring Daft's actions. However, just because someone is your friend doesn't mean you shouldn't publicly call them out. I can understand the aspect of wanting to talk to them privately regarding certain actions, but when they are blatantly wrong about something, especially when it could put someone else in danger, it's important you say something and make sure people hear you and understand the issue. This is the action she took against Oh My Gosh It's James, who only mentioned Speechy's school. The fact she took it easier on Daft when he did something worse seems a bit unfair. Do you know what the real kicker in all of this is? A large portion of the animation critics were teenagers around the time Quinn had called them out, with Daft and I believe the right opinion being the exceptions. When we look at Turkey Tom and Ellis Mark taking things out of context, and Oh My Gosh It's James stop doxing Speechy, we see a bunch of teenagers getting called out for smaller infractions than what Daft has done in the past year and a half. At least with them, they could say they had some maturing to do. That still does not make their actions excusable. I'm not saying that. However, it is important to mention that Turkey Tom and Ellis Mark have improved their content significantly since then. Back to the main point, what can Daft say? He is an adult and was in the past. How much more maturing does he need to know that what he's doing is wrong? Also, on that note, it's kind of funny that Daft points out James's age was 18 when reading Dangle's post, when Daft is in his early 20s and has done worse stuff, even to Dangle.
Specifically stating his age.
Seriously, with his age, experience, and past mistakes, he should know that 1. You should not leave out context to manipulate people and spread false narratives. 2. People are not obligated to forgive you when you apologize, as that is not the point. 3. Don't dox people. And 4. Say sorry when you hurt people. These are all things Quinn covers in her video from 3 to 4 years ago, and these are things Daft continues to do while Quinn says he is sorry for his actions. Now some of you may be saying, but Bandit, Quinn isn't Daft's mom. She's not responsible for what he does and can't be breathing down his neck on every video he makes. And you would be correct. However, there's a difference between being negligent to one's actions and supporting one's actions. As I mentioned earlier, she helped with Shameless Reskin, a video which did many of the things she called out Daft and others for in the past. Also, Daft Pina was really the only person in her video that she vouches for specifically in name. She still encourages others to give him a look. Thing is, she doesn't need to slap him on the wrist, but she doesn't need to support him either. In the end, her video still holds up, but her words and actions do not. Now again, some of you may ask, but what about any conversations they have in private? Considering that Daft has taken no action and at the very least saying sorry to the people he hurt, I don't think any conversations they do have in private are making any headway. Now, why does all this matter? Well, Daft Pina's following has only been increasing in these last few years, and while it's nice to see a new genre of criticism and exposure become popular on YouTube, it is not a good precedent for the future of art criticism. While Quinn never asked to be an authority on critics or Daft's actions, she's still seen as one because of her video and the influence it had. And it makes sense that would be the case, as she was the only one to really knock Daft Pina down a peg, not only bringing attention to his actions, but why they were bad in the first place. But because he chooses to say nothing, Daft can return to his old habits without anyone sizable enough to make a difference. Multiple others have tried to say something, but a combination of the algorithm as well as some honestly poor presentation of their topics just makes a lot of their points seem weak. Some examples are Advil using edgy humor and out of context information, and Sunny was overall just being a jerk, bashing Daft as an artist instead of pointing out the actual flaws. And if things continue like this, Daft could influence future creators to make poor or outright false points on others, getting and using information from people without respect for their wishes, or making it worse for other people without any consideration for what they do. This is what happened to Dangle, and it is also what happened to someone named Dylan. Dylan has been mentioned by multiple people in the past, including Just a Robot and Advil. Basically, Daft went to Dylan for information on Cosmodor, who was revealed to be a groomer. At the time, Dylan was a minor, and upon finding out someone he thought was his friend was involved with something so horrible was very stressful and scary. Thus, he was reluctant to say anything. In a comment left on a video by Just a Robot, Dylan stated he was afraid of throwing allegations as he had no online presence, while Cosmo was one of the largest cartoon reviewers at the time. Not only that, but according to him, he didn't even have hard proof. Daft, not knowing Dylan's age, saw this reluctance as a sign of trying to cover for Cosmodor, thinking Dylan may have been an adult. He ended up giving information just to be left alone, but when Daft made the video, he felt hurt and stated his feelings with a bunch of angry tweets on Daft. After these tweets were made, Daft made a comment saying that Dylan and the group chat he was in knew the information the whole time but stayed silent. Daft doing this instead of being the adult he is and talking to Dylan, and maybe thinking about how all of this would affect a 15-year-old who is not prepared for these kinds of scenarios, shows a serious lack of professionalism and understanding in his actions. Now, whether or not this was done with malicious intent has been debated by multiple people, and on its own does not actually prove anything. The reason I say this is because Daft's statement was still true. While this can't be taken as malice, going the route of the worst possible scenario would not be fair. Another argument could be made that Daft published this comment to give more knowledge regarding the situation. Acknowledging that people knew about the grooming but never spoke up is an important topic to discuss when looking at grooming cases in the future, as it shows that more people may know about these situations than we realize. Personally, I'm not sure what to make of it. Daft's unfair action towards James, Dangle, and TinaFate don't put him in the best light, but at the same time, getting all the details is an important aspect of journalism, such as interviewing John Bob in one of his previous videos. Speaking of John Bob, the other instance of tension between Daft and Dylan comes from Daft's John Bob video, where he compared WonderWaffle63's harassment for his slight affiliation with John Bob to Ellis Mark's harassment from Dylan, making Dylan out to be someone who was acting unfairly. My issue here is that these are different situations. WonderWaffle63 was harassed simply for having his OC used by John Bob, and he didn't even agree with how the OC was used. Dylan was mad that he got harassed for having knowledge about Cosmodor but not speaking up earlier. But Ellis Mark had the same information if not more about Cosmodor, but he didn't speak up either. Now, this was unfair of Dylan, since Ellis Mark was a victim of Cosmodor, which would make speaking up a lot tougher for him. While I can understand Dylan's frustrations at the time, as again, he is dealing with a horrible situation that someone his age wouldn't know how to handle due to inexperience and ignorance, that did not make his actions right. Which is why Dylan tried to make amends. Based off of Dylan's own words, he didn't have Ellis Mark's full story. But once he did, he deleted all of his previous tweets on Ellis Mark and apologized privately. The last tweet Daft shows in his video on John Bob is made to look like Dylan backpedaling, when the reality was Dylan realized he was wrong and was trying to make things right. While I was recording this, I realized that there was some important information in Just Stop's video that I missed. In a comment from Dylan on Just a Robot's video, Dylan stated that after his mishap with Alice Mark, he deleted his angry tweets, apologized privately, and made a tweet to support them. However, the timeline seems a little different in Just Stop's video. Based on what I could see from Dylan's private apology, it was made in 2020. All of the tweets he made against Alice Mark were up until at least 2021, which I can infer from Just Stop's video. This leads me to believe that the tweets were not deleted after the apology to Alice Mark, but after the video made by Just Stop. Also, some of these tweets included private DMs between Alice Mark and Dylan, something which Dylan did not specify when he was giving his story. While I still believe that comparing WonderWaffle63's hate to the conflict between Alice Mark and Dylan to be unfair and misleading, it's important to state that by only going off what Dylan said, I likely could have been missing information that adds more context. Due to this, I have a message to Dylan. While I understand your frustration with what happened and believe you have a right to be mad, I'm not entirely sure what you are looking for. You claim to be afraid of speaking up, but don't hide your enthusiasm for others who criticize Daft, especially when some of their information is not the best or sometimes just incorrect. While I agree that not enough people properly address his issues, I can't tell if you want fair criticism to be made or if you just want him to be run through the coals, especially when your own words don't seem to have all of the details. I can understand not wanting harassment, but at the end of the day you still tell your story to people who try to call out Daft. If you're going to play a role in things, your story needs to have all the details, both positive and negative. It needs more proof other than just your word. The point is, we see a similar scenario between Dylan and Dangle, where Daft reached out to two people who were hurt by somebody, used their information without respecting their feelings whatsoever, and then when they got mad and tried to express their feelings, Daft instead put them in a negative light, while he tried to make himself out to be the hero. Again, Quinn, the pro-apology tip would be helpful. My goal here is to not make people hate Quinn Curio, as he does not deserve hate. My goal is to say that Quinn is not a reliable source when it comes to Daft's character due to her blatant bias and lack of action on her part. Thus, her words, friendship, and assistance that she gives to Daft cannot be seen as Daft improving. But that's basically it about Quinn. Now I'm going to talk about some other connections Daft has. Okay, so let me start off by saying that I don't hate Telepurte. Actually, let me rephrase that. I frickin' love Telepurte! Seriously, out of all the amazing internet animators we have in our current time, Telepurte has to be one of the most inspirational of the last few years. Just by watching his animations, you can see the progress of his hard work and dedication from October of 2018 to now, and it shows how much you can improve if you really put in the work. If James popularized storytime animation, Telepurte is popularizing shorter quality animations. This is really important, as for the longest time on YouTube, animation seemed like a dying art due to the amount of time it took to make one that was of good quality and good length. Yes, the short videos are not as profitable as the longer ones, but it still fits with the algorithm better and has helped give exposure to success to other talented artists. I feel this will create a new form of animation to appear on YouTube or TikTok, and revitalized a more complex and traditional animation that everyone was missing during the Storytime era. And for that, I need to say that his work and dedication is amazing, and I am thankful for him to inspire others, including myself, to continue our pursuits in art. Honestly, if it wasn't for Daft Pina, I would have never even known that Telepurte existed. That being said, I have a problem with Daft using Telepurte's opinion in his Ethereum video, as if he has a valid opinion. So here's the thing, asking people for their opinion to expand your understanding and perspectives is fine. The problem arises when you use those points to try to sway others in a direction that you want them to think. This is a manipulative and cheap tactic, as you are basically using someone's fame, or hell, someone's skin color when considering Daft, as a means to say that you are right simply because they agree with you. That is not research. I mean, no disrespect to Telepurte, but I don't think he's an expert on Twitter artists and their personalities. When looking at the video, not everything Daft was saying about Aether was in context. And while the subject was beaten to death, having Telepurte speak but not Aether seems a bit unfair. Now, this is not to say that everything Aether was saying is justified. As I see it, and this applies to Antunes as well, if you want to use your freedom of speech to make racist and offensive jokes, then other people can use their freedom of speech to make the claim not to support the people who make racist and offensive jokes. This is the internet. You really need to be ready for people to get mad at you for saying stuff like that. Now, Telepurte probably agreed with Daft in the things that he said because Telepurte trusts Daft's opinion, and Daft helped him gain some more recognition, so Tele likely wanted to help Daft out with the video. There is nothing wrong with this in itself. The problem is the power of his opinion, as well as the validity. I really don't think Telepurte has the time to be doing research on people he follows, considering that he animates daily. Hell, the guy animates that he is lonely and doesn't even have time for relaxing. This doesn't mean that he isn't capable of having good opinions on people, but when you don't have the time to inform yourself on the stuff that other people do, you should not be giving opinions that could affect those same people's careers. It's okay to not research everyone you follow. Nobody does that. But just don't talk about them where everyone can hear you. I mean, come on. Nobody does a background check on every Twitter artist they follow. They say, hey, I like this person's art, and click the follow button. But let me give an example. On Twitter, there's a very talented artist by the name of Jisoo, who is well known in the Smash Bros community, even though she recently left. She has a very sizable following, and you can tell that her art is of high quality. Now, if you type her name in YouTube, you'll also find evidence of her mass manipulation of the Smash community to tell lies and exaggerations during the Me Too movement of 2020. These lies caused Sky Williams and Zero Gonzalo Barrios' lives to almost be ruined and shunned by the community as well as the world when they really didn't deserve it. And even though this information is out there and the evidence is clear, Jisoo still refuses to apologize to those she has hurt, and uses her influence to tell other members of the Smash community to avoid the videos, labeling them as lies made up by drama seekers. On top of that, her Twitter is full of posts reminding her followers of the abuse she suffered instead, and plays the role of a victim who did nothing wrong while others try to take her happiness away. If you're curious about this, I've linked several videos that go into more detail about the situation. So, why does this matter? Well, Telepurte follows Jisoo. Now, this does not mean Telepurte likes following crappy people. This just shows that Telepurte really does not have the time, or likely even the desire, to do the research to have a solid opinion, even when the evidence is very easy to find. Thus, Telepurte really should not be giving his opinion on situations like this. And considering his size and popularity, he should be more careful of what he says about others. By the way, he still follows Ethereum and TinaFate, so his comment on possibly not following Aether does not seem to hold up anyways. As a side note, the aspect of just using anyone's opinion on a matter is a seriously bad tactic in itself. Let's say famous person A damages someone else's reputation with a limited opinion. Well, if they don't have much knowledge on the person they're talking about, they need to say so. If you don't acknowledge your ignorance, you end up spreading it instead. And when you have a large following like Telepurte or Daft Pina, there will be people who perceive your ignorance as gospel, which continues to hurt the reputation of others. This is done in the videos about James, where people who don't know him, the situation, or Adam give their opinions, usually negative, as if they actually hold any weight. Like Ishmael a Whale, for example.
Is your friend okay? They're posting some weird ass stuff on Twitter.
I don't like the word friend. Whether we are or not is no one's business.
I found myself asking, who is this guy? And why are we supposed to care about his opinion? Or similarly you do. Neither of them prove to have any knowledge outside of what Daft says, and show no signs of knowing James or Adam. Actually, talking with people who at least know the creators you are focusing on in your video offers new information, kind of like what Daft did with Pants' Pajamas when he talked about The Odd Ones Out's book. Talking to strangers with a strictly outside and ignorant perspective does not. Telepurte does not seem to know Aether, and Ishmael a Whale or Simply Do does not seem to know James, Adam, or any of the people who worked on James's games. Why do their opinions matter? This can end up creating a precedence to win arguments simply by having someone of high status agree with you instead of doing actual research. Completely bypassing research and interviews that could give more insight and better opinions is only going to keep people less knowledgeable and thus unable to have good opinions. Also, what if you're wrong about what you said? This would run the risk of tarnishing the reputation of a respectable artist who wanted to trust your opinion. If it turns out that your viewers don't agree and you end up giving a bad reputation to your acquaintance who helped you in the video, you basically just made someone else go down with you, all because you wanted to make somebody else look bad unfairly. And that's pretty shitty. I want to take a moment here to talk about SunnyTM's video on Daft Pina. Earlier I mentioned it was flawed due to his needless bashing of Daft's writing, which really said nothing of his character or his abilities as a critic. Also, it's just not how you treat someone who's creating art, as it doesn't matter if they start off bad, everyone has room to improve. However, he mentioned that in his video, Daft contacted him to speak about James in his Hidden Hypocrisy video, which Sunny didn't agree with.
I know this because after Daft befriended me, almost immediately, he asked me to read lines for his latest video. What video was that, may you ask? Well, it was the Odd Ones Out video where he accuses him being racist. I wonder why he would get me to read lines in a video where he calls someone racist. It couldn't be because I'm black, could it? That'd be too much of an argument from authority. And we all know Daft is against that, so he would never willingly participate in doing it for the sake of a video, right? My problem with the video on Odd Ones Out is not only that he called him racist, but had the audacity to come to me, who knows nothing about the situation, nor cared because I was black. And when I was informed of the reasoning, I told Daft I didn't think it was justified. He shrugged off my concerns and reiterated that the former friend who was calling James out was also black, therefore was correct in their statements, even though she made extremely racist remarks towards white people in her post. I had to keep telling this to Daft until he eventually added a section to his video in which he talks about her racist remark. All this.
Judging as we have seen Daft will use the points of others to try to validate the narrative Daft is trying to push, this is something I believe. We saw it with Ishmael, Telepurte, and even Quinn Curio. Speaking of Quinn Curio, the situation with her also matches what Sunny said happened to him, stating that when he released a video on Daft's content heavily critiquing it, Daft reached out, nitpicked it, and asked Sunny if he could start reviewing scripts in the future.
Daft meticulously went over every critique I had towards Saturdays Off one by one, pausing the video every few seconds to dissect what I had said and to refute the arguments I had, as if to prove me wrong in my opinion. I learned now that Daft has a habit of doing this with creators who make videos about him, get him into calls and being nice but stern in an attempt to persuade them into deleting their video on him. Instead of him asking me to delete my video, however, he offered me a gig to rewrite his new project, Arcade Plays.
The same thing happened with Quinn, as after her video was released, Daft Pina heavily nitpicked it and then became her friend and got her to help on scripts. Now, some of you may be saying, hold on Bandit, where's your proof of Daft Pina nitpicking her video? I thought he agreed with her points. Well, initially, that wasn't the case. If you check today, you would not find a comment from Daft in Quinn's video because it has been deleted. However, I was able to find the original comment, and it was very long. I will show the whole thing in pieces as it's too much just to post onto the screen. I'll give a brief summary, but I highly advise all of you to read the whole thing so you can have a stronger opinion on this matter. To summarize, Daft did everything he could in his comment to find something wrong with this video. At some points he would say that Quinn didn't show enough of the other critics she talked about and just made him look mean. At another, he would say that his name was spelt wrong in the title by putting a space between the words Daft and Pina. But the most interesting thing is he would try to emphasize all the good things he did. Whenever he would acknowledge that he was wrong about something or treated someone unfairly, he would also make sure to highlight the things he did right, whether it was calling out an artist who didn't credit people, a pedophile, or how he helps people improve their content. Even go as far to say, you forget that people actually like our content. You know, the same content telling people to give up and saying they're faking mental illness. The point here is that instead of acknowledging the mistakes that he made and leaving it at that, he also chose to double down on the stuff he felt he did right, trying to switch focus to the positive result that he brings. Normally, I would not dig up something from 3 years ago as a staple of who someone is today, but in this case I see a similar pattern. In the case of Quinn and Sunny, Daft threw a small tantrum at the people who criticized his content, and then tried to befriend them and get them to work with him on his projects, even when those projects made dishonest statements. The thing is, he succeeded in doing this with Quinn. When we take a look at Dangle, We see Daft try to make his intervention on her situation seem like a good thing, as he brought attention to the issue, even though Dangle regrets ever making her Tumblr post because of his intervention. The same thing happened to Dylan. In both of these cases, Daft tries to double down on what he wants you to believe are the good aspects of his work, all the while paying little attention to those caught in his crossfire. Even with TinaFate, he only apologized to his fans. And that was after he was bombarded by the internet for his actions. It's not so much Daft doesn't like to apologize, more Daft doesn't ever want to say he is wrong, even when it hurts other people. It's probably the reason why when Neko Koda made their video talking about the issues with Daft's critics, Daft mentioned it in one of his videos, while focusing heavily on how his critics stated they got some aspects wrong, still ignoring the aspects they had right.
In that case, these groups would be arguing with themselves and not the creator involved, especially when the detractors admit to not really researching their hit piece videos, or even when proven incorrect are unable to admit that they did anything wrong. I don't agree with a lot of their points, and a lot of it isn't really true or taken out of context.
The issue here, though, is that instead of owning up to the mistakes that people were calling him out for, Daft used Neko's video to focus on the fact that his critics got stuff wrong, bringing attention to someone who defended Daft, rather than just apologizing. I had actually written and recorded a portion on Neko, stating that I thought there was some bias on their side, but after having a pleasant conversation with them, in which they were very polite and easy to talk to, I realized that wasn't true. While speaking with them, Neko showed no hesitation to acknowledge that Daft had his issues. The reason for the videos were that Neko felt people would try to find any reason to hate Daft, and to be honest, he wasn't wrong. A good example is people getting upset with Daft about interviewing John Bob, saying he was platforming a groomer, which was honestly a stupid complaint. Neko's videos weren't so much to defend Daft, but to point out the flaws in his critics that so many people, such as Just a Robot, seem to miss. Now back to Daft. When I look at his actions and words in the past, I see the same actions and words now. The only difference is that they are directed at different people. Some of his fans say, but he's done good things too, just like Daft would for himself. Here's the thing. Do you know what you call someone who only bullies one person? A bully. There's no other word. Trying to make an argument that he's done good deeds for you is like saying that someone else's bully shouldn't be expelled because they helped you with your math homework. Good deeds are not currency that can be exchanged so you can get away with doing bad things to other people. I don't care how many people he helps. He needs to be held accountable for the people that he hurts. Now for our last aspect. Something which I'm sure a lot of people have been asking, why hasn't anyone spoken up yet? Yes, I know Just a Robot has made 2 videos on Daft, but I'm talking about bigger people. Other artists, other animators, and other content creators, besides Antunes and Ethereum. When this question comes up, a certain situation always comes to mind. Remember when I mentioned Senor Palo's animation on Storytime Animators? Well, this video sparked a nerve in Egoraptor, also known as Aaron from the Game Grumps. In this situation, Egoraptor called Senor Palo a bully for his animation, saying it was cruel and mean to the community, despite multiple other Storytime animators actually liking it and telling Egoraptor to get over it. This situation was actually mentioned by Daft on Twitter, mentioning James liked Egoraptor's post and that spreading false narratives was wrong. Ironic considering who's saying this. Now, whether you agree with Aaron or not, I personally completely disagree and think he needs to grow up, but that's besides the point. Aaron felt the need to stand up for the Storytime community when this video was posted. If that is the case, why hasn't he said anything to Daft about his video on James? Or hell, even his videos on Jaden in the past? James seemed to be the only person who publicly showed approval for Egoraptor's tweet, even when most people disagreed with him. And James seems to know him personally, having hung out with him on public tours and even kissing him. Hell, Jaden and Amarichu videos seem to show them all having a good time with each other. So what makes Daft different from Senor Palo? Some may say it's because Daft is a smaller content creator, and Aaron doesn't want to use his numbers against him. But I think it could be out of fear, or more just not wanting to have to start and put out a fire. You see, Daft has shown a willingness to make anyone look bad if he wants to, especially if they think negatively of him. And he has a fanbase and friends that will blindly follow him. Even Just a Robot stated he was afraid of Daft, and if Daft doesn't like you, he will not be fair when he speaks about you. While starting a fight with Daft won't guarantee your online career ends, it will likely get you involved in a lot of drama you don't want to deal with. This could create distractions while trying to make the content you actually want to make. Like making a long comment on a video that spreads a bunch of bullshit about you, only to have it nitpicked and be used as ammunition later, which only adds more stresses to being a content creator.
The drama channels will pick apart everything you say.
Even if he doesn't go after you, his fans could. Most people don't want to deal with this. This is why I believe most Storytime animators don't say anything to Daft about his video on James. Good thing I don't have much of a following, because that means I got nothing to lose. But the last thing is that Daft has a lot of respected content creators that he's connected to, such as Telepurte, Quinn Curio, Just Stopped, and Meat Canyon. Going against him means possibly going against these creators as well, which could create more drama and more fans to deal with. And considering that they all either overlook or just don't know about the things he's done, they certainly aren't going to be against him when he's in trouble. Meanwhile, whoever is against him likely won't have the same level of support. And now we reach the end. In summary, the problem is Daft's friends don't hold him to the same standard that they hold others to, or in Quinn's case, don't hold him to the standard they used to. And when these friends help gain people's respect of you, it creates an issue with fairness and honesty. I can understand wanting you to believe your friends do things with the best intentions in mind, and that sometimes they will make mistakes. But when there's a pattern to their negative behavior, you need to ask yourself if it really is a mistake or a choice that they make. When creators with respected opinions refuse to acknowledge the issues displayed by their friends, their lack of acknowledgement gets respected as well, making it more difficult for improvements and apologies to be made. If they don't want others to think the worst of Daft, they should be willing to call out his BS so he can improve. Until that happens, they will continue to be a part of the problem that is Daft Pina.
But it is important to discuss these things so that he himself knows that what he's doing is an issue and that he can do better going forward. If you don't know what you've done wrong or what the problem is, how can you improve from that? So that's why I think it's important to have videos like this that bring these situations to the forefront so that they can be addressed and hopefully implement that into his endeavors going forward.
Asshole! And you don't do anything. What do? You sit and you eat and you vomit those words back to make people laugh. You know how hard I work for this shit? Do you know how my whole staff works? What sacrifices I make to make you happy, and then you just smugly just fucking shit on my shit?
Okay.
It hurts!
Yes.
It fucking hurts when you write that shit. It hurt you.
It does. It does.
He thought you were gonna close his fucking restaurant down. You asshole. And what do? You just write shit to you just make shit up.